two-wheelers. And he says, Max, I brought your ATCs back. And he takes them off the truck. He says, that one runs about 90 or 100 miles an hour now, and that one over there runs around 80. So Max says, I'm telling you, these guys, these are the shit, man. You don't have any more. This is who you'll work with. So the guy introduces himself. His name is Mickey Monday, and he's like a redneck from Florida that's been here his whole life.
I want to say I didn't like him. First time I meet Johnny, he's driving this black Mercedes two-door that's got drug dealer written all over it. He just looked like somebody that I don't want to have anything to do with.
Mickey was okay. He had a big race boat. He was involved in racing.
You remember the show MacGyver? That's this guy. He could do stuff that just was incredible. And Max had me working with these guys, and he sent me to Colombia.
Medellin, Colombia. Right now, there is little or no cocaine enforcement activity here. This city only has a population of about 50,000, yet there are about 50 airplanes parked at this airport. The dealers control much of the countryside.
This town is completely dedicated to narcotics.
Rafa would introduce me to the people he was working with.
We met, you might say, the elite of the drug business from Colombia.
And it would be the Ochoas.
Here lives a man believed to be one of the most powerful cocaine traffickers in the world. Fabio Ochoa. This is his ranch, and he is treated as a hero here.
They were a huge name in Colombia. There was no secret about them.
Fabio Ochoa is considered by many as a godfather of the business.
Some intelligence officials charge that you and the members of your family are the biggest cocaine traffickers in the world.
Yo no sé de que hablen mentiras y cosas.
I know nothing of lies being told. This doesn't interest me. I am well known by all the horse breeders in the world. My life has been honorable, and I can tip my hat.
This was Pablo Escobar.
Mr. Escobar, by any measure, has to be considered the John Dillinger of the cocaine trade in Colombia.
And this is Carlos Lader.
Carlos Lader is wanted by U.S. authorities for drug trafficking.
He stated cocaine was the atomic bomb and he was going to drop it on America.
The cocaine traffickers have more power and money than the government.
They make it sound like they had, you know, an office the size of this with computers and they got 40 secretaries. It's just a bunch of bums down there.
Most of these Colombians came from really poor families. And when everybody in this country got into cocaine, it was just like they struck gold. The Beverly Hillbillies, that's basically what it was. The Colombians have farms, fincas they call them there, just filled with cocaine down there because they just kept producing it.
They call this the Valley of Orchids. Flowers are a principal export. So is cocaine. More than 20 tons a year. For this valley is the cocaine capital of the world.
And it was a whole process. It was like a factory working.
Campesinos, peasant farmers, support their families by processing the leaves into coca paste.
It was a matter of survival. I mean, there were no other crops that would grow in that environment, and at that altitude, in those mountains.
The farmer lives off the coca plant, and without it, there is no point in living.
Without coca, we would have to die.
The coca paste is then taken to processing labs to be made into cocaine. One popular route is this one, along the Amazon River.
And in going down the river in a longboat, the guys in the boat would stand up and they would hold the bags of cocaine. And I remember them shouting, "Coca Roca," and, you know, showing it off right there. This is what we have.
There are just too many coca fields, too much money, and too many traffickers.
At first, I thought it was all their stuff. But once you get to the point where you're unpackaging it, they're all marked different. It didn't all belong to somebody. Maybe 50 belonged to this guy, and 10 to that guy, 5 to this guy. They would all pool their stuff and send it up. Going down the freight yard, when you get the train full, then you leave, you know. That's what they were doing.
The ships and planes that smuggle it in come to Miami, and then the coke spreads all over the eastern United States.
We bought some property in Lakeland, built 2 runways there, put up a couple barns that were really hangars. They looked like barns. But when you'd open up the hayloft door, you would see that it was shaped to the tail of an airplane. I would use a 5-, 6-, 8-year-old family car.
And we would load 300 pieces, and we would put air shocks on a car so that the car wouldn't fall to the ground.
And we would use a tow truck to tow the vehicle back.
They would bring them into Miami.
I personally like to go when there's a big moon up. I call them a smuggler's moon. The moon's sitting right there, and it's real big, because we landed with no lights. There was a night looking at an alternate where I watched some guys come in off Route 27. They didn't know I'm there. I'm listening to everything they say. I have night scopes and goggles. I'm watching. I could have been the man. And they came in, and it was a ball of fire. I thought it was like an atomic bomb. I've never seen a flash. If you took a flash camera and went right up to your face and would click, it would not have been as bright. It blinded me because the night scope blooms. You know, the guys on the radio, oh my God, they're dying, they're dead, and then boom, right in front of me. It was one of these things. It was an Avo. They didn't know they'd put the power wire up since the last time they'd been out there. He hit it with the top of the nose, went over the top of the airplane, took all the antennas off, and chopped the tail right off. And his friends all hauled ass. And so did he, and left a little thing in the plane that I took. A whole lot of little things. It was a rather worthwhile night, and all I did was go out there to look for an alternate.
Mickey's operation was a very sound, very good operation, although it was limited.
They wanted us to go more often, bigger airplane or something. And that's when we purchased a Cessna Conquest. We paid $980,000 for it. In cash. How do you like that? You could try that one today. We'd made one trip with it.
Sometimes you just get bored, I guess. In that particular trip, I went up there. Not to unload it or put it on the truck, it was just hanging out.
The pilot knew he was going to have a problem when he could see the lights of Tampa on the horizon, which meant he was too high. If he could see the lights of Tampa, that meant that they could see him with radar.
Next thing I know, wham, these cars start flying by, police cars. And here comes a chase plane.
First they were chasing him with the military airplanes.
Here come my guys who had the cars up there flying into the restaurant. What's up, what's up? We gotta get out of here, we gotta get out of here.
And the military realized that it wasn't a threat. And by then they'd called in the U.S. Customs.
Cops are everywhere, all over this stuff.
Everybody's going to go out the door. You don't throw nothing away. You throw everything away. First the co-pilot would go out. 15, 20 minutes later, the pilot would go out and would leave the plane on autopilot and give it to the Bermuda Triangle.
And nobody believed that I lost the load. And I said, I lost it, man. These guys will tell you I lost it. And they said, well, why isn't it in the paper? Show us the article in the paper, you know what I mean?
When it first happened, of course, there's nothing in the newspaper.
And you needed to bring them proof, but I couldn't prove it. I had no way to prove it. Man, they came flying to my house with machine guns and cruiser killers.
I remember my brother and I were out on the porch, and these two guys drove up. Rafa came. They get out of the car with guns.
You fucked us. You took our load. And
of course, me, I go right over and get in his face and start screaming off my property, blah, blah, blah.
Colombians were actually afraid of this woman.
Next thing I know, John comes out of the house, my brother comes out of the house, and they both have weapons drawn and standing there with a laser shotgun. And
she didn't give a shit who came. Rafa could bring 6, 7 guys, and she was a big girl, and Rafa was only like 5'5", and she was looking down at him, screaming and screaming.
Of course, there I am screaming.
You ain't coming in my house today.
But it looked like they were going to have a gun battle right there.
What are you, crazy? For this amount? Why would I take your load? I could have ripped them off, but I didn't do it. Are you nuts? I'm working tomorrow. We're doing 1,000 tomorrow. Why wouldn't I take you 1,000? 500 kilos compared to what I'm bringing every week. It just wasn't worth it.
It wasn't until the next day, and then I started reading about all this stuff being found.
And that's the proof of the paper, because when you hand them the article, 480 kilos busted in Yeehaw Junction.
And of course, they realized that we weren't stealing it.
Okay, here's my 480 kilos.
If we have to get rid of it, it's not our problem, it's your problem.
But without the paper, you had no proof.
Unfortunately, I mean, we lost a $1 million airplane, and they lost whatever it cost them for their product, so they write it off. And we wrote it off, too.
Rafa was crazy like that, and I guess it was because he did so much coke, he would get paranoid.
He was just a little guy that was kind of crazy. You know, you had to be a little leery of him because he would get high. He'd smoke the shit. He would take like half of the tobacco of the cigarette, put cocaine in it, a little tobacco back in, and smoke it. One time, a trip was on for Saturday, and some kind of problem had come up, and I needed one more day. Max was out of town, so I get to Max's house, and I go into the dining room. Ralph was there, sitting at the head of the dining room table. I thought it was marijuana, but it turned out not to be. A circle about this big and about that high, and he's using like a credit card or something to keep it, you know, in shape. What it is the tobacco from a cigarette. There's been so many cigarettes that he actually has a pile of tobacco this big. Now, he's had that much to smoke that there's that much tobacco. And I'm going, whoa. And he's like drooling. And the people are there all scared to death of him because he could say something and somebody would be history. And I go, oh, and I don't speak Spanish, and I got to try to tell this guy who's higher than a kite that we need one more day. I ended up having to get Max's son, which I really didn't want to do because the kid was only like 14 years old, to translate for me and to make sure that somebody there would call, because I don't want to send my plane the next day and there's nobody there. He was in one of his binges, and those were when you had to be afraid of him. And it was amazing. Here's a guy